Every so often a grower will bulldoze an orchard of perfectly healthy, still fruiting apple trees. It looks like vandalism. It's actually one of the biggest financial decisions in farming, and the trees going in behind them won't pay for themselves for years. An orchard isn't really a crop, it's an installation. You plant it once and live with that decision for decades. So the reasons to tear one out are rarely that the trees have stopped producing. Usually it's that they're producing the wrong thing. Apple varieties move in and out of fashion, and a block planted 30 years ago may be full of a variety shoppers have quietly abandoned, fetching a price that no longer covers picking it. Or the trees are old, tall, and awkward, needing ladders and far more labor per bin than a modern planting. The grower isn't replacing broken trees, they're replacing an outdated system. And here's where it gets genuinely difficult, because you cannot simply plant new apple trees where apple trees just stood. Soil that has grown apples for decades builds up a community of fungi and other organisms that specifically attack apple roots. Put fresh young trees into it and they sulk. Stunted growth, weak establishment, years of underperformance. Growers call it replant disease, and it's one of the central problems of orchard renewal. The land looks perfect, it's been growing apples successfully for a generation, and it is now actively hostile to the very thing you want to plant. The modern answer sits underground. Almost no commercial fruit tree grows on its own roots. Instead, it's a graft. The roots and lower trunk come from one plant called the rootstock, and the fruiting variety is joined on top. The apple you eat is determined by the upper part. Almost everything else, including how big the tree gets, how quickly it starts fruiting, how it handles cold and wet, and crucially how it copes with disease in the soil, is determined by the rootstock underneath. So breeders developed rootstocks specifically for this situation. The Geneva series, in particular, has become the default choice for replanting precisely because it tolerates the pathogens that build up in old apple ground. The grower solves a soil problem by changing the roots rather than the soil. The replacement orchard usually looks nothing like the one that came out. Traditional orchards were rows of large, freestanding trees, widely spaced, perhaps a couple of hundred per acre, needing ladders to pick. Modern high-density systems put in dwarfing rootstocks that keep each tree small and plant them densely, often 1,800 to 2,000 trees per acre, trained flat against a trellis and wire like a hedge. Instead of climbing into a tree, pickers walk along a narrow fruiting wall. The change isn't cosmetic. A thin, well-lit wall of fruit colors more evenly, sprays more efficiently, and can be picked far faster than a big three-dimensional tree. The reason density wins comes down to time. A large tree on a vigorous rootstock might take 5 to 10 years to reach full production. A dwarf tree in a high-density system is bred to be precocious, meaning it fruits young. These orchards typically begin bearing within 2 to 3 years and reach full production by around year 4 or 5. When you're financing an orchard, pulling that first serious crop forward by several years changes everything. It also produces more fruit per acre once established, because you have far more trees each carrying a manageable load, rather than a few trees carrying enormous ones. None of this is cheap, and the gap between systems is dramatic. Establishing a high-density orchard has been costed at roughly $26,000 per acre, against about $7,500 for a lower-density semi-dwarf planting. Other estimates put dwarf orchard establishment somewhere between $6,000 and $13,000 an acre depending on the system, with around $10,000 per acre spent just getting through the first 2 years. You're paying for thousands of grafted trees rather than hundreds, plus the posts, wire and anchors of the trellis, plus irrigation, plus the labor to plant and train every one of them. Then comes the hardest part of the whole exercise. Waiting, that land now costs money every single year and produces almost nothing. It still needs pruning, training, spraying, irrigating, weeding, and fertilizing. It still carries the same property costs. But there is no meaningful crop to sell for the first couple of years, and no full crop for several more. Growers therefore replant in blocks rather than all at once, taking out one section at a time so that mature parts of the orchard keep generating the income that pays for the young ones. A whole farm replant would mean years with no revenue at all, which almost nobody can survive. And layered on top of the horticulture is a genuinely uncomfortable guess. When a grower chooses which variety to plant, they are committing to sell that apple in serious volume 5 to 10 years from now, and for perhaps 20 years after that. So the real question isn't which apple sells well today. It's which apple people will want a decade from now. Get it right and you have a premium product just as demand peaks. Get it wrong and you have spent tens of thousands of dollars per acre, waited years, and produced a fruit that supermarkets no longer want. Some varieties are also club varieties, licensed and planted only under contract, which limits who can grow them at all. This is what makes tree fruit so unlike growing wheat or corn. An arable farmer makes a fresh decision every single year and can change crop entirely next season if prices shift. An orchardist makes one decision and lives inside it for 2 decades. Everything that follows, the pruning, the trellis, the labor, the marketing, is downstream of a choice made about rootstock, variety, and spacing years earlier, often by someone who has since retired. It's less like planting a crop and more like laying out a factory that happens to be alive, which is why replanting is so often described in generational terms. The person driving the bulldozer through those old trees is frequently taking out a block their parents planted and putting in one their children will harvest at full production. The orchard you walk through is the physical record of decisions made decades ago about varieties, roots, and spacing, by people betting on a market they could not see. Follow along for more of the long-term bets hidden behind the food on your table.